All right. We are live for another Neville Goddard lecture series. Hello, hello, for those of you who are joining us live. Excuse me, for those who are joining live and those of you who are watching after the fact. Appreciate you being here. I know it's been a minute since we've had another lecture, but I'm especially excited for today's. This one has been requested a number of times, and it is absolutely, I enjoy all of his lectures, of course, but this is absolutely one of my favorites. It's one of the most important to grasp and understand when it comes to changing self, when it comes to that change in self concept that we speak so much about. Today, I'm going to be reading from Neville's lecture called Art of Dying. And I know the title sounds kind of weird. It's not death in the physical sense or as we might perceive it. This is about change, ultimately. And just to avoid confusion, there's actually two lectures that Neville gave with this title. One that he gave in 1959 and another in 1965. I will link both transcripts below. I'm going to be reading from the lecture from 1959, although I am going to share an excerpt from the lecture he gave in 1965, just to kind of give better context, because that's ultimately what this lecture series is all about. It's about context, and it's about deepening our understanding of Neville's teachings by going through and reading his lectures and sort of breaking down what he is saying and interpretation of what he means. Because a lot of people, myself included at first, struggled with understanding Neville's lectures just due to a lot of the antiquated ways of speaking, the old-timey, old-fashioned ways of speaking, the translations of the Bible. It can be challenging, especially if English is not your first language. So I feel it is incredibly, incredibly important that we go to Neville, we go to the source of understanding, especially with all of the content out there, the AI content, just saturation of content that is unfortunately leaving a lot of confusion and feeling of overwhelm. So I'm going to be toggling back and forth between screen sharing and then coming back and sort of breaking down what we just went over. I'll be reading through and then coming back to sort of translate or decipher what each passage is saying. So I am especially excited to dive in. Be sure to grab a pen and paper. And also definitely, if you want to read along, the transcripts are available in the description box. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right. The Art of Dying by Neville Goddard, March 23rd, 1959. If you are with us for the first time, this is what we believe and teach here. We firmly believe that you, the individual, can realize your every dream. And the reason is that God and man are one. We believe that the difference is not in the mentality with which we operate, but only in the degrees of intensity of the operant power itself, and that we call human imagination. Keats said, "You can take any one great spiritual passage, and it will serve as a starting point to lead you to the 32 places. Take the simple one in Paul's letters to the Corinthians, I die daily," or Blake's statement in his letter to Grab Robinson, "Death is the best thing in life. There is nothing in life like death, but people take such a long time in dying. At least, their neighbors never see them rise from the grave." If you understood Blake, you would not think of death as the world thinks of death, but you would see that no one can grow without outgrowing. But man is not willing to outgrow, and yet he wants other things than those he has. But if you remain in one state, you will forever have to suffer the consequences of not being in another state. If I remain in a state of poverty, I must suffer the consequences of not being in the state of wealth. So I must learn the art of dying. Paul says, I die daily. Blake says, people take such a long time in dying. Man does not outgrow his state of ill health or his old job or his environment. We must learn the art of dying. And this week is the great death, and we are told that God dies that man may live. Let's go ahead and break a few of those things down really quick. Because I know that, again, it could be quite a lot. So right out of the gate, Neville is referring to dying daily. Of course, once again, this is not referring to death as we know it. It's not referring to physically dying. It's referring to dying to the old self. It's the change in belief and assumption, ultimately. And I'm about to read a passage here from the other Art of Dying lecture where he breaks this down a little bit more. But he says, if you remain in one state, you will suffer the consequences of not being in another state. If I am remaining in a state of poverty, then I suffer the consequences of not experiencing wealth and not being wealthy. It's all about the state of consciousness we occupy. So I die to one state by removing myself from it and moving to another, by taking my attention and placing it on another. That's where the human imagination comes into play. That's where we imagine ourselves going to the end. That is how we die. And we should make sure that this is something that is at the forefront of our objective. Because another thing that Neville mentions, or as Blake quoted, people take such a long time in dying. We are very stubborn and resistant to change, is what that means. But we must learn this art of dying to the old state, dying to that which is unwanted, so that we can move into a new state and experience what we desire to have instead. Let's go ahead and continue. And like I said, I just want to share from the other lecture, just a blurb from it. And I will have both of these linked down below. Paul said, I'm sorry, guys. Paul said, every day I die. Well, if every day I die, and if today I give this body, I couldn't tomorrow die. But every day while I wear this body, I die. Well, how do I do it? Let us turn now to Blake, one who had a clear, perfect vision. In his 96th plate of Jerusalem, he made the statement, every kindness to another is a little death in the divine image, nor can man exist without brotherhood. Can't exist but by brotherhood. Well, how do I do it? Every kindness to another is a little death in the divine image. Man is only the sum of all his beliefs, all of his impressions. That's what I am. That's what you are. If you want to know a man, you've got to get behind his words, even his thoughts, to the beliefs from which they spring. So I am the sum total of all of my beliefs. So I meet you on the street or hear of you, and you don't look well, or someone writes me and they tell me that you are not well. That's an impression. So thereafter, if I think of you, that impression comes into my mind's eye. I must learn the art of dying to that impression. I must bring you into my mind's eye and put you into an entirely different light and see you as I ought to see you, were you the one that I would love you to be. When I am self-persuaded that you are that new impression, I have died to the other impression. So every kindness on my part, every little kindness, is a little death in the divine image. That divine image is death. It must die and die all through love. For what is the divine image? Listen to it carefully, as Blake defines it. Mercy, pity, peace, and love is God, our Father dear. Mercy, pity, peace, and love is man, his child and care. So what Neville is trying to outline here and explain in very simple terms is that man is the sum total of his beliefs and assumption. We are the sum total of what we are assuming and believing to be true. We're the sum total of all of our impressions. So when I hear news of somebody else, when I have somebody tell me something, that news is going to leave an impression on me. I am going to use that as the foundation for my beliefs about you. If you tell me that you are sick and unwell, that is something that I am taking and impressing. And thus, I'm going to experience you as being unwell. The art of dying is learning to, instead of just accepting those words, accepting that impression, I'm imagining you different than how I have just witnessed. So if you tell me you are unwell, it is upon me to go into my mind's eye and see you healthy, see you doing well, see you as you want to be, how I would want to see you, and that is healthy and happy and full of life, full of energy. That's what the art of dying is about. This is about not accepting whatever impression was unwanted. If somebody tells you something that is not ideal, we don't just blindly accept it and use that as use that to further pad our beliefs and assumptions, because we are just the sum total of our beliefs and assumptions, and that is what becomes our experience. Let's continue. Oh, wrong one. Let's go back to the other one. There we go. We say that imagination of God and man are one. No matter how far it goes, universes are created and sustained by the same power that sustains our environment. We say the power is the same, but we recognize a vast difference between the power that sustains the universe and that which sustains an environment. The difference is only in the degree of intensity of the center of imagining. So if we increase the intensity in the center of imagining, we will create greater and greater things. So I see in my dream, and I must learn to die to what I am in order to live to what I want to be. Once again, Neville's saying here that the same power that created the universe and everything in it is the same power that created your environment. It's all your imagination. It's the same power. The only difference is to the degree of intensity, which is why we are prompted to strengthen our imagination. It is very much like a physical muscle, that the more that we exercise it, the more that we use it for greater and greater things, we will strengthen that intensity and we will imagine and be able to outpicture greater and greater things. And Neville goes into the mystical meaning of death in the Bible, talking about Moses. This is going to be interpretation of scripture, so I'm going to read through it and then try to break this down as best I can. Now, this is the mystical meaning of a death in the Bible, the death of Moses, a story familiar to all of us. We are told that Moses comes out of the land of Moab, Deuteronomy, and then scales the mountain of Nebo, goes to Pisgah, sees Gilead, and finally he looks into the promised land of Jericho. But the Lord tells him, I will let you see the land, but you cannot go into it. Then Moses dies. The present state cannot be carried into the new. It has to die as a consequence of the new made alive. And again, I'm going to break down all of this. I know it may be a lot, but this is important. Quote, "But his eye was not dim, and his natural force was not abated. And no one knows his burial place. First, remember that all the characters of the Bible take place in the mind of man. I am Moses. You are Moses. It means to lift up or draw out of. We are told in the very beginning of the story that he was pulled from the bulrushes. The word Moses, spelled backwards in the ancient Hebrew, means the name, or I am. So I am drawing out of my own being, or the I am. Moses comes from Moab. This comes from two Hebrew words meaning mother and father, or womb. Then he scales the Mount of Nebo, which means to prophesy, or which represents the subjective state I long for. I will prophesy for you, or you for another. You single out a person's longing. If he longs for something, it means he does not have it, else there could not be any longing. But Moses climbs Nebo, that is, he participates in seeing the state longed for. I single out something that implies I am the man I want to be. I scale the mountain. Then comes Pisgah, which means to contemplate. I contemplate what I want to be. Then he sees Jericho, which means a fragrant odor. I will contemplate the desired state until I get the feeling or reaction that satisfies. I have not only scaled Nebo, but I have reached Pisgah and looked into Jericho. I am filled with the emotion that implies the act is completed. Then there is Gilead, which means hills of the witness. Then I, as Moses, die. I cannot go into the promised land, and no one can find where I am buried. What does it mean? If I am poverty-ridden and frightened, and then you meet me and see me as free as a bird and happy, then I am not the man you knew who was frightened. Then where is that other man buried? For Moses is the power in man, generic man, male, female, to draw out of himself anything in this world he desires, and to so enact the drama that he dies to what he was, that he may live to what he is enacting. That is Moses, and no one can know where he is buried. But we are told his eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. That is to say, when I die, that is when I enact the drama. I do not wait for signs to appear. It is when I am most aware of my restrictions and feel the pressures. This is when I must learn to die. I must learn to let go of what my senses dictate and go mad and yield to what is only a dream. But sustaining it and living in it, I die to what was physically real as I gradually lift up what was only the dream. You knew only the frightened man and not the other one. No one can tell you where the other has gone. I know that was a lot. Let's break it down because there are some really important things to note here. And again, Neville's going over and explaining the mystical meaning of death and the interpretation in Scripture. And for those who may not be familiar with Neville's interpretation of Scripture, he did not take the Bible in the literal sense as people who were around thousands of years ago. Each person of the Bible represents a state of consciousness. These stories are all taking place within us. This is about our evolving from man to God, man to Christ. So everything is meant to be taken in symbolism, in metaphor, which is why all of these places, people, they have hidden meanings and interpretations to them. So when we talk about Moses, which means to draw out of, and Moses dying, we're drawing the new state out of us and dying to what was. This is all in reference to the change in self, the change in our old belief patterns, our old assumptions, fears, doubts, insecurities, all of it. then Neville goes on to explain, if I am poverty ridden and frightened, and then you meet me and you see me as free as a bird and happy, then I am not the man you knew who was frightened. So again, we have to learn to see others as we want them to be, as they desire to be. If somebody is sick, if somebody is scared, if somebody is impoverished, if someone is unwell, we take it upon ourselves to see them in our mind's eye as how they would want to be: successful, happy, healthy, abundant, you name it. He also makes an important note that as far as when to die to that old state, we do not wait for signs to appear. It is when I am most aware of my restrictions and feel the pressures. Then this is when I must learn to die. So what he's saying there is we don't wait for something bad to happen. As soon as we notice that we are having internal confliction, if we are having fears, if we are noticing things are coming up for us that make us uncomfortable or angry or frustrated, that's when we must die to the old self, not waiting until something happens in the 3D to do so, which unfortunately is a habit that a lot of us have. Let's continue. So, this is how the art of dying is dramatized in the Bible as the death of a man. But it has nothing to do with any certain man, for the story of the Bible takes place in the mind of every man. I will crucify myself, for God crucified himself in me that I may live. Ooh. But I now but now I must nail myself upon the thing I desire and, remaining faithful to it, to lift it up as God nailed himself upon me. The present body is believing himself a man called Neville, giving Neville the same power that is his, but keyed low. We're going to talk about that in a minute. In the hope that I will lift up the power to bigger things in my world to which I can nail myself, and so lift them up. There is no possibility of man making his dream alive unless he nails himself to this cross that is man. We are living because God nailed himself to us. Now man, keyed low, yielding to other states, and not to what the senses dictate, becomes one with the state and nails himself to it, fixes himself in the state through emotion and feeling, and then he will be lifted up. So, a couple things that we want to note there. I'm sorry, I think I was muted for a second there. My apologies, guys. So again, I just have to stress and reiterate one more time the importance of changing inwardly. If we have a plan B, if we are doing that thing where we hold ourselves back, wondering, what will I play as my last card if this doesn't work? Then we have not yielded. We must buy that pearl of great price. Cannot stress that point enough. There must be complete abandonment as though it were true, and then you make it a reality. Plain and simple. Let me see, where was I? Blake looks on all states as permanent, and in his great poem regarding the halls of Los, I cursed the earth for man and made it permanent. So states remain, and man passes through states, as though cities. If I do not pass through some state, but remain in it, I think it is the only reality. You cannot conceive of a state that is not, for the whole is finished. But man is awakening only by dying to the state after state. So this is also important to note. States of consciousness are permanent. Realities are permanent. That's why it's impossible to fail at this, because your desired state is never going to disappear. It's never going to cease to exist. That outcome is always going to be one that we can imagine and experience. But what we are doing and how we have to see it is we are passing through these states, just like we do travel through cities and towns. Like we're on a road trip, we're just passing through. But if I remain in it, if I remain in this state, I'm going to think that this state is reality, that this is just how it is. Hence why it is so easy for us to get stuck. Because maybe I don't know any other state. This state feels like home base, and this feels so real to me that the idea of conceiving something else, of moving into another state, feels so far-fetched. But nonetheless, we're being told here that we have to die to the old state. We have to move. There is no other way. You take a friend who is not well, or cannot set himself free from some state. You represent that friend to yourself as he should be seen by the whole world. And to the degree that you are faithful to that representation, to that degree you will bring him out of the old state. It does not matter if he knows you did it or not. He does not have to know. But remain faithful, and you will bring him out of the old state into the new that you are seeing. All things are burned up when we cease to behold them. Moses could see the promised land, but could not go into it. If I am true to the likeness of what I behold, then I, the old man, cannot go into it, into the new state. Something called the power goes into it, but no one recognizes it, for they cannot recognize the transformed being. Again, so important. To the degree that you are faithful to that representation. Notice how Neville words these things. He's not just saying, oh, just imagine the state and it'll happen. He's not just saying, oh, just picture it in your mind and it'll happen. He's saying, to the degree that you are faithful to that new state, to the degree that you are self-persuaded. So to the degree that we start to feel and believe and trust in that new state, we will see it outpictured. Hence why feeling is such an importance here. I know there's quite a few people that teach feeling isn't necessary, that it's not required to manifest. That is quite literally the stark opposite of what Neville taught. And to be clear, I know he mentions a couple times here about emotion. It's not so much the emotion as the feeling of naturalness, the feeling of realness. We may have emotions come up for us in the imaginal acts, and then when we go into these new states, emotions may naturally arise, but it's not inherently about the emotions. It's about the feeling of naturalness, the feeling of this is real, the degree that we are self-persuaded by this new state. We all feel so secure in recurrence. If we know that a thing is fixed and that next week things will be as they are today, I feel secure in that recurrence. I can have done something that violates the moral codes. I can have come from the wrong side of the tracks, but I can accept that, for I am used to it. But to say that something awakens in me and can become what it will, that is frightening to man. So we are told to awake out of sleep, for recurrence brings security to the whole vast world. One does what he does as if he did it in a nightmare. For God had to forget he was God to become man. And that whittling down to this level is the very limit of contraction. But then comes the awakening from that deep dream into which he threw himself to make me alive. So this lifting up power goes about setting men free. For God became every man, that every man may in time awaken as God. Eventually, the whole world will awaken, and the poem will be in full bloom, and it will be noble beyond our wildest dreams. And then it will exist for us, and we will be one with the creator of the great poem. That is the art of dying. So what Neville's saying here is really, really important as well, that the challenge that we face is our comfort in the same old, same old. We take comfort in the familiarity. We feel secure in recurrence. When we know things are going to be a certain way, when we can come to count on things happening a certain way, we feel safest there as man, as human. Hence why it is so challenging for us to accept something different. That uncertainty, that fear of the unknown creates a lot of anxiety within us. So the idea of occupying a new state, the idea of introducing something that is new to us can feel quite daunting at first. But hence why we practice this, hence why we focus on building our faith. He also goes on to say that God became man so that man can become God. Again, the whole reason as to why we're here in this human experience. But God had to forget that he was God in order to become man. So we are very much sleepwalking here, or we have been, at least, until we start to learn and awaken through these teachings and through these experiences. Let's continue. Next Sunday is the great drama. I'm riding a beast and I am at the crossroads. Quote, bring me a colt on which no man ever sat, that is tied by the road where two ways meet. Here is state I have never ridden before. It is so unnatural to feel myself to be the man I want to be, and to actually get into that state and ride it without being thrown by reason, which tells me I am mad. But if you know the Lord is your imagination, you can ride it into Jerusalem. We are told we will find the animal at a crossroads where two roads meet. We are always at a crossroads of what I am and what I want to be. So I can So, can I ride the beast I find at the crossroads and ride it into Jerusalem? Then I am going towards heaven, but it is not continuous on my line of motion. It is contiguous. It is adjacent to where I am, for heaven is a state of consciousness. I try to catch the feeling that would be mine if I were the man I want to be. But that involves a death. I must abandon myself to my dream as if it were true, and, living in it, I lift it up and make it real. Everyone must pass through this state, for this is the only true religion in the world. Religion, like charity, begins at home with oneself. The mother seed of all religious beliefs lies in the mystical experiences of the individual. All ceremonies are but secondary growths superimposed upon it. So we are at the crossroads of who I am, where I am, and who I want to be, where I want to be. So this passage is saying, ride that animal into Jerusalem, or move yourself from that crossroads into Jerusalem. Go to what you desire to experience. Do not continue to go the same path that you always have. We must be different if we want things to be different for us. Period. I must abandon myself to my dream as though it were true, and, living in it, I lift it up and make it real. Religion means to be tied to or devoted to. But if I am not in love with what I am tied to, I must yield to something more lovely and make it real. I must bear my cross. I go so far, and then I want to cross to the other line, where my heaven is. For everything is interrelated. We all interpenetrate each other. Interpenetrate each other. We are all one. So there is interpenetration of the whole world, and then comes conflict. And from that comes the solution of the conflict. For we must conflict if we are all interpenetrated. But then we must bring about reconciliation. Whatever the solution is, that is the reconciliation. But we cannot stay in a state or any condition forever. Each new state bears within it the seeds of new conflict. Every heaven becomes in time hell. A thing is ours for a moment, but as we continue in it, it will bring about conflict. As long as there is interpenetration, there is always conflict. So live in any desired state, and then as conflict arises, resolve it and die to it, and then move into another state. Thus we grow and outgrow. Thus man awakes. So what Neville's saying here is that, I mean, of course, if we are not in love with the state that we are occupying, then we must yield to something different. We must yield completely to this new state. He mentions something interesting, though, in that with that, this interpenetration, or everything and all things being one, this new state will eventually come with conflict as well. And what that means is that eventually you're going to desire something else. Once you get the thing that you want, you're going to naturally have something else follow that. Once you reach one peak, you're going to desire to scale another, because that's how we move and that's how we evolve. Once I get something, I'm going to have another desire take its place. So I want to learn to die to the old states if they no longer serve me, or when change is needed, so that I can live in these new states and I continue to grow, I continue to thrive and prosper. That's what he means there. Not necessarily that there's always conflict, but that we're going to keep having desires. Once we get something that we want, there's always going to be something else to scale to. There's always going to be something else. So we continue to practice this art of dying to the old and moving to the new. That's what we're doing anyways, whether we realize it or not. This is all just moving between states of consciousness. Nothing more, nothing less. No man can be born in one environment and ever realize another if he does not yield to the state desired. So Blake was right. The best thing in life is death, but it takes man so long to die that his friends never see him rise from the grave. Can you not see, then, how it is with your friend who always tells you the same things, even though you have not seen him for 10 years? Everything is still recurring. Nothing is new. But that makes him feel secure. Man does not want change. It frightens him. I tell you that your imagination is God. Believe it. Exercise it. It is keyed low, but as you lift it up, you intensify it. And then vision after vision will be yours as you begin to awake. Do not think you are greedy because you are demanding things or the changing of things. You are here to create as your Father creates. Want what you want and yield to it and create it. That's it right there. Want what you want and yield to it and create it. Then you will want higher and higher things. But nothing blesses a man unless it comes down from its heavenly state and takes on flesh. You are the only one who can clothe it in reality. But it remains a state unless you yield to it. That is so important. Everything is only remaining as a hypothetical unless we yield ourselves completely to that new state. If we are 1 foot in, 1 foot out, if we are fearful of that change, then it is going to remain a hypothetical state. Where Neville says that your imagination is God keyed low, what he means is that it, as human, as man, our imagination is much, much weaker. It has been weakened considerably, and that is we can imagine. We're only imagining to the fraction of a degree of what we are capable of. We are capable of so much more than we utilize. We're using a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of our imagination, our creative power, and what it is capable of doing. So as you lift it up, as you practice putting yourself in these other states and imagination, you will intensify, you will strengthen your imagination. And then vision after vision will be yours as you begin to awake. Want what you want and yield to it and create it. This drama in the Bible is all about you, for the Christ Jesus of the Gospels is your own wonderful imagination. There is only an infinite God and the creation he loved, and he so loved it. He wanted to make it alive and then share it and even change it. So God became man that man may become God. That is the great story of the Gospels. Every mystic in the world tells the same story. Then every man is free. There is no judgment. For no matter what man has done, it is God's doing it in a nightmare. There is only complete forgiveness of sin, no judgment and no argument. But man can change facts. The past can be unmade. So a man has done this or that. Use your strange imagination and turn the great wheel backward until Troy unburns. It means to revise. I know a lady who burned her hand and then unburned it. She poured boiling water on her hand. She lay on the couch and tried to undo it mentally, what she had done. It was difficult because of the pain, but she kept trying. She redid the scene and poured the boiling water on the tea and brewed it, and then she drank the tea. This was the imaginal act. She did it over and over, and finally, in the act of thus making the tea, she fell asleep. When she awoke some hours later, there was no trace of the burn. She wrote, "You would have thought I should go right to the hospital, but now there is not even a sign of that burn." Now let us go into the silence. So, ending that note on revision. And for those who have not read a whole lot of Neville's work, he speaks often about revision. And the other lecture in 1965, the Art of Dying lecture from 1965, he speaks in even greater detail about the importance of revision. This is how we begin to die to that old self. This is how we begin to die to that old state. We do not continue to accept what once was if it was not what we wanted. We do not continue to take on the facts of this world. We do not limit ourselves to what feels possible or probable or likely to happen. We go and yield completely. That is the art of dying. And that is ultimately how we move into that new state, occupy it to the point where it becomes fixed, to the point where we have essentially been crucified or nailed to it. There is no other way. And he lays it out very, very clearly here. And it's why this is one of my favorite lectures, because one thing that is very easy for us to lose sight of is the objective that this is the change of self that we're doing here. This is not to change the 3D. The 3D change is the byproduct of the change that takes place when we die to that old state and we become someone new. And he talks about practicing this. He talks about practicing dying daily. See other people as you want them to be, as they would want to be. Do not hold that old image, that old impression of them, if you want to see them change. This is what we are doing every day. We die daily so that we can be born again. We can be reborn into the state that we desire to experience instead. We can be the person that we desire to be instead. It doesn't get much more stripped down than that. We keep practicing, and to the degree that we are persuaded, to the degree that we remain faithful, change is inevitable. And that concludes Neville's lecture on the art of dying. Again, there were two lectures actually that he gave. This is the one from 1959. There's also the one from 1965, which I do recommend giving a read or going over. I will leave both of those down in the description box so that you can make sure to go back over, take any notes that you may need. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope this gave some more clarity and insight into the law of assumption and Neville's teachings. I do plan on coming out with another lecture video next week. But in the meantime, everyone, take care, be well, and remember to die daily. Till next time, you guys. Bye.